Welcome to the Mom and podcast. We're your hosts, Suzanne Kearns
and Missy Stevens. We want to help you through everything that happens in the ellipses, from your professional life to your emotional health.
You're a mom and so much more. Let's figure out what comes next together. Welcome to the Mom and podcast. I'm Suzanne Kearns, mom and writer, LGBTQ ally, and this week, a last full week of school cheerleader. Hooray. Yes.
And I'm Missy Stevens, a mom and writer, child advocate, and this week, amateur home decorator, furniture rearranger.
Photos, please.
Oh yeah, I'll put photos somewhere. My children are not happy with what I did, so we can take a vote. This week, we are excited to welcome Lauren Smith Brody to the podcast. She is a mom and writer, consultant, and speaker. She is the author of the best-selling book, The Fifth Trimester, and the founder of the Fifth Trimester Consulting, which advances parents' equality in the workforce. As a leading voice on gender, business, parenting, and now pandemic parenting, Brody, a mom of two boys and former executive editor of Glamour Magazine, is featured frequently as a writer and expert in media, including the New York Times, Good Morning America, Slate, Parents, CNN, and Network News. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. My and list is like enormous this week too. I feel like it just grows and grows. Getting an air conditioner fixed.
Oh boy.
I am trying to get COVID testing arranged for my son to go to camp, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, his lists have only gotten longer and longer.
Yes, especially ends. With everything moving home, we're all doing the ands that maybe were farmed out once, and it's a lot of anding.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. And I know now we're talking about, oh, yay, it's going to be summer break. But I think there's also oh, no, summer break.
I was like, wait a second. No, it's funny. I usually look so forward to sort of the, free range. I mean, as much as you can kind of deal with it of summertime. And, and this year, it's been so loosey-goosey all year. I'm actually not looking forward to that unstructured time as much as we usually do. But
yeah. I agree. We just talked about it yesterday. My husband and I looked at each other and we were like, we have to get a plan. And my kids are older. It's not like I have little bitties, but it's still, they're going to be at loose ends with so much more free time. And we've already had like a lot of free time, like you said. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's going to be.
Yeah. We're going to test the limits of Minecraft for sure. See,
right? Yeah. I have one who would literally play Minecraft all day long, and that's not going to work.
Good news is the worlds are infinite. I've been told that it's a little bit like the universe. You can just keep expanding them.
We may have the boys that find the end. I don't know. We'll see. That's going to be the summer challenge.
It is great. I mean, they are working together and it's super creative and I don't have any problem with it, but it can't happen all day long.
So now to get back on track with the Fifth Trimester, for anyone not familiar with the book or the business that evolved from writing the book, just if we could talk a little about you and the Fifth Trimester and also this really cool new Ask Lauren column that you have. Would just love to hear about what you've been doing, even on the family and parental leave legislation that you've been helping with. I just want to hear it all. Tell us what you've been up to.
There is just so much. I'm living the dream in many ways because the work that I do directly impacts my life, and the women I talk to so influence the work I do. And it just feels like I get to do what I tell my kids that, I hope they get to do one day, which is work that feels like it counts and matters and applies to their own lives and can do some greater good. So I worked in magazines for my whole, I call it my 1.0 career for 16 years. And I had both of my boys when I was at Glamour Magazine. I've had a bunch of different jobs there. It was an amazing place to grow and learn back when publishing was kind of a healthier industry than it is now. And I've always been a very transparent person. I kind of never knew how to lie to save my life. I couldn't spin things for celebrities. I would just be like, this is who I am. And so when I had my first son, I was really, really transparent about how hard it was to come back to work. And I had known there was a lot of support through the first 3 trimesters of pregnancy. I learned about the 4th trimester, which was popularized. The term was popularized by Harvey Karp, Dr. Harvey Karp, the pediatrician. Mm-hmm. Who's created the SNU now, and back then was the author of The Happiest Baby on the Block, with the idea that we need to recreate the womb to soothe newborn babies. And so I knew that, but throughout the book, Dr. Karp just kept saying, get to 12 weeks, mama. They all call you mama. And you're your baby will wake up to the world and, get into some sort of semblance of a schedule and give you something back. And I thought, well, 12 weeks, why does that sound familiar? Oh, right. Because that's when I go back to work. And so I sort of realized that there was this additional fifth trimester and, another child later and much research later and many colleagues who had gone through it later. I realized that really we're not meant physically and in terms of our mental health to go back to work until about back to paid work, I should say, until about the 6-month mark. And yet, obviously in America, the vast majority of women who work for pay are back at work before then. So the book that I wrote after leaving Glamour examined the experiences of more than 800 new moms with all sorts of approaches to motherhood and different definitions of career to figure out what did we have in common working against us and for us, and how could we advocate for each other and essentially be one giant collective working mom mentor. So wrote the book came out, it supports moms. I turned it into a business where I go into companies and help them retain new moms. Then the pandemic hits. I was mostly at that point a speaker, and all of my speaking engagements disappeared. My husband's a doctor. He got COVID because there was no PPE at his hospital, like very, very early on. He's totally fine. I, served him his meals on a tray, from behind our bedroom door.
Yes.
And like overnight became the full embodiment of failed domesticity. And I had kind of a crisis of identity. If I was building this career and had built this career around gender equity, and suddenly it was really unequal in our home.
Mm-hmm.
But I did keep some of my coaching clients. And then eventually some of the corporate people started to come back and started to invest in not just new moms, but all parents. And I realized this was really an opportunity to grow, both personally and professionally. And so I've really expanded what I offer now to help businesses see the value in supporting anyone who has a caregiving need: mom, dad, elder care, spousal care, even self-care. And that's what I do now. I do lots of webinars, lots of speaking engagements, some consulting, some coaching, and some writing. I'm a journalist, so I bring what I hope is good, solid understanding of how to read research and how to interpret it for real life to my work. And so that's where I am. I have these two boys. They've been in various forms of hybrid or only remote school for 15 months. And luckily they're 9 and 12. And so they know how to log into a Zoom. But before we did this call, I'm a time zone away from you guys. And I, left lunch out on the counter for the older one who's supposed to be at school today and can't be because he had a sniffle yesterday. And that's just what life is now.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting you bring up that period of the gender inequity, even though it was a very short period, but that's a lot of what our podcast is about, and that Missy and I talk about is what that does to someone mentally long term. When you used to be this, there was a time when I made more than my husband before I quit working, and there's a pride that comes with bringing in a paycheck and feel like you're pulling your weight. And then 15 years later, what that does to you. I mean, I don't know how long you were in that situation, the few months of COVID, but so you can relate to that mentality.
We're still in it. Like my older son has been in every other week school all year. My younger son just went back 3 weeks ago. And it can get shut down any moment. Ben is still gone literally 14 or 15 hours a day because his department got moved out of the hospital to another hospital outside of the city so they could turn into a recovery unit. So it is the only very, very, very near past for us. So I wouldn't even say that we're done with it yet.
Yeah. So you're basically one of the statistics of all those articles that have been how even 50-50 partnerships, it seems to be falling on the women during the pandemic. It's just it's an interesting phenomenon, and I guess not necessarily surprising, but
it's interesting to see it being studied. I think that's one of the nice things that has come out of this, and to see it being recognized and making headlines. And a lot of the inequities that were so deep rooted and already there are just exacerbated, and that's terrible. But it's gotten to sort of a breaking point of crisis that is requiring solutions. And that does give me some hope.
Yeah. And talking a little bit about solutions, we are so thankful for the work you've been doing to reframe all of this from what we've just been talking about all the way back to maternity leave itself, which is kind of where it starts, I think, for working moms. And I've heard you say in interviews before that most American women go back to work well before they're emotionally ready
Yeah.
and physically ready. And I think it's something that's been so taboo to talk about, but physically at 12 weeks, your body is still doing all kinds of things that your body has never done before. And it's overwhelming to go back into the workplace. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your research and diving into those problems of using this 12-week, this arbitrary, oh, in 12 weeks back you go to work, when research shows 6 months would be a lot better.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, you've brought up so many good points. So when I did the surveying for my book, I'm not an academic researcher, but I'm a journalist. So I know how to read studies. I know how to interview people who are experts in different areas. And I knew how to put together a survey that would really represent, a diversity of experiences. And everything sort of coalesced around that 6-month mark. And this was actually before I had even done the deep dive into pubmed.gov to find the studies
Yeah.
that showed actually 6 months is the point. So I asked women, when did you feel emotionally sort of back to, quote unquote, your new normal? And when did you feel physically back to normal? And I actually, specified in the writing of the question, this is not like back in your old jeans. This is like, when did you feel comfortable in your own skin again? And both of those answers hovered between, 24 and 26 weeks, I think it was. And then when I looked at all of the research, the medical research, well, it turns out it actually goes back decades. And so we have known, and you see it played out in every other developed country in the world, that 6 paid is really important. 6 paid months of leave is really what's the bare minimum required to protect women's physical health, mental health, baby's physical health, because you're more likely to get your baby vaccinated on time and all their medical appointments that they need when they're little, if you're not actually back at a paid job. It protects women's income long term. It protects their status in their workplace. And there's a limit to that. Like, it's actually sort of that curve starts to go back down around the 9-month mark.
Oh,
So the sweet spot really is right around like 6 to 9 months. And that was indeed what I was hearing, anecdotally in the interviews I was doing, but also just like statistically in the surveying that I did. And yet 25% of American women are back at work in less than 2 weeks after having a baby. That is largely because almost half do not have access to family and medical leave. And that's, and the unpaid FMLA, that's the 12 weeks. That 12 weeks was always meant to be a compromise. It was one of the first, I think maybe the first thing that Bill Clinton signed into law in 1993 when he took office. And what a lot of people didn't know is that it had actually been debated for 9 years. And when family and medical leave was first proposed, it was meant to be 6 paid months. And it got sort of hacked away at until we got down to 12 weeks, which is interesting because we think of, and, I named my book The Fifth Trimester, right? But we think of life in seasons. And so I think that 12 weeks is a very sort of natural cadence that we're used to. And yet it had nothing to do with any science, like literally nothing.
No.
And yet we've normalized it. And so you hear people saying all the time, did you get your whole 12 weeks? Did you take your whole 12 weeks? And even all of the new plans that have been proposed, and most of the state plans, even the ones that are not fully enacted yet, but that are working toward their full allowance of what they're giving, like it's all with this baseline of 12 weeks being a normal and necessary amount of leave. And even that's really not enough.
It's really not. I feel like it really messes with the mental state of mothers, because you think, well, if 12 weeks is, that's the generous amount that people get, then I should be back to business in 12 weeks. I should feel good. I should look
what's
good.
wrong with me that I still don't feel back to myself?
It's the origin of mom guilt. That's why I say mom guilt is a sexist social construct, is because it comes from that first moment of feeling like you can't really do all of these things as well as you've been told you should be able to. And that's because we've been told, oh, by 12 weeks, you should be dandy, ready to go, girl.
And by 12 weeks, I didn't know my name still. Like, you're just foggy.
I have plenty of clients who work for themselves, or who have some flexibility, or who just are frankly, physically superhuman, who really want to be back at work sooner. And by all means, I am not saying don't go. If that's good for you, good for you. But people who need more time should have more time.
Yeah. Yes. And so you've been really active, legislatively, but also going into businesses. Can you talk a little bit about that process? And is there anything that listeners can also do to help support some of those initiatives that you've been working on?
Yeah. The most the simplest thing to answer that question by saying is vote for more people to work in politics at every single level who support the needs that you have. And the way to do that most easily is to vote for parents of young kids. And those are also people who often have the hardest time running because they are raising their kids
Yeah.
and they have to, raise funds. There's an amazing woman named Luba Gretchen Shirley who started a foundation called the Vote Mama Foundation that is specifically training younger parents. I say younger, but it's really just people who are in that stage of having young kids to run for office at all levels, and also helping them change legislation sort of state by state to be allowed to use their campaign donations for childcare, because this is what she was up against when she was running for office. And she actually challenged the rules at a federal level and got them changed. A lot of people don't know about it yet, but you are allowed to use campaign funds for childcare. And that makes or breaks these campaigns, because if you're working round the clock campaigning and you're not making money campaigning and you can't use donations to pay for childcare, how are you going to run? So that's going to make the biggest difference, is just voting people in and raising.
Great advice. And here in Austin, I know we have a group called Annie's List that kind of does a similar thing for progressive, not necessarily moms, but female candidates. And so, I think that that's worth looking at different local levels to see if there's something available in everybody's locale where they could help support women.
Yeah.
But also just to know that, whatever degree of privilege you have, to use that to make one step, to push just a tiny bit out of your comfort zone in your own work environment, culture, industry, whatever kind of work you do, because there are going to be lots of other people around you who need that same, quote unquote, accommodation or understanding of their personal life need, who aren't as able to speak up. And so we really do see, our country is a little bit backwards in that, some of our norms come from policies and laws, and some of them come from private sector, sort of workplace norms. And some of the healthiest industries we have are the ones that are also most able to support parents. And that's been a big shift even over the last year. And they are really changing cultural norms in a way that I think is going to push people to, have stronger beliefs and vote for candidates who are going to make these changes permanent.
Thank you for doing your work on that.
Oh my gosh, all I do is report it.
I think it's really important that companies like Facebook and Amazon, who I know have really great policies around all of this, they are bigger and they can do it at a level that maybe a smaller company can't do it, but that's where it starts.
Yeah.
If they're doing it, then eventually this cultural shift could happen that even the smaller companies
and they're
are
not
able to offer this.
Even those two amazing companies that I've both worked for, are fantastic, but they are not, perfect. Like you by any stretch of the imagination. One thing I will say that Amazon is doing right and doing really, really well is that they're giving the same benefits to their fulfillment center workers, their hourly wage workers, as they are to people in corporate offices. And that is something, a crack that I see, a big flaw that I see, even in a lot of the progressive companies that I work with, is, the person I'll be talking to is in HR, and they don't actually even have it, because they're sort of considered like ancillary staff. They don't have access to the same benefits as some of the people who they're working to move along in their careers. So this sort of upstairs, downstairs idea of a division of access is a problem. And I see it starting to be solved, which is kind of amazing. Just even in the last couple of years, I see, who's invited to the talk that I'm giving, and it'll be like now, all employees, not just a certain sector of employees. It's very cool.
That's good to know. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the fifth trimester, but for some of us who are in what trimester are we in, Missy? Like the 600th?
I think I'm like 62nd trimester or something like that.
But we're math, and I couldn't the other day, and like I'm apparently so many trimesters along that I can't even remember what the math was that I did last week.
But yeah, so there's going to be a lot of, now that the world is starting to open back up, people have been facing financial struggles in their families due to COVID. There's probably going to be a lot of people who were stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home parents who are considering going back to work probably sooner than planned, to help take care of some of those financial hardships. So do you have any advice for fifth trimester or the 50th trimester about looking for a flexible work option during this day and age?
Well, we have this incredible window of opportunity right now, which is that, everyone has essentially been through a fifth trimester or is going through one, in that we are now having to be a lot more transparent about our personal life needs. It's all been on display, like you guys are looking at the corner of my bedroom right now. Um, you
Yes.
know, my dog
Door
is laying on
closets.
the bed. She like busted the door open while we were talking. And so if she barks, okay, and I told you
Yeah.
about the like microwave meal that I left for my son in the kitchen. Like, all of this counts. And the reason that I say it proudly is because I want other people to feel comfortable doing that too. And it's not to just be a mom problem, but to be a mom and dad and caregiver problem. And it's a problem to be solved. It's a problem we can now see. And one thing I always say is we cannot solve problems we can't see. So now all of this stuff is visible. We have seen our colleagues' lives. We have seen how precious, frankly, everyone's lives are, even just,
Yeah.
the fears that we had around our health this year.
Right.
And so as you go back, do not be afraid to ask for exactly what you need, because your manager is a human who has also been through a pandemic and probably gets it to a greater degree than they may show you they do. But they can't read your mind. They cannot know that your son's school is now starting a half an hour later. You have to actually tell them that, but then you can't just ask for what you need. You need to explain the solve for it. So here's how this is going to work. Here is my plan. So anything you negotiate, be really transparent. Don't feel like you have to talk in terms that are entirely like quote unquote professional, when really this is about integrating work and family in a way that works long term. But come with the solution, and maybe even come with two potential solutions that would work for you for how you're going to get your job done. Know what your job is. So many of us have had job creep, where what you're paid for and what, the job you signed up for was one thing and you've added to it. And that's in many ways a good thing, because, there's sort of that threshold that you hit where then you move up and you're able to negotiate for more. But in that kind of gray area in between, you're probably doing more than you're actually supposed to do for what you're paid for. So don't be afraid when you come up with this plan to come up with a plan that satisfies, like, here's how I'm going to get my job done. I know what my job is. And then if you do more, then you could potentially push for more, whether that comes in the form of money or greater flexibility. I actually think that you shouldn't forego money for flexibility if you're doing the whole job. But don't be afraid to negotiate. Don't be afraid to bring up a need, and definitely come with a plan.
We keep hearing that general idea, and I think that that's probably some education that women really need, is the ability to go in and ask for what you want.
Yeah.
Because we're just conditioned not to in so many ways. But this idea of having a plan, knowing how to make your job work, and having the confidence to go into a place and say, I've thought through this. I know I can do this job. Here's what I want. I don't think we were taught to do that back when we were graduating and going out into the workforce. At first, it was you sit in the interview and you ask you these kinds of questions, and then you say, oh, yes, I can do that. Oh, yes, I can do that. And
you be
we
grateful
have
for
to
what you
unlearn.
get.
Yeah. We have to kind of unlearn how to get a job and ask for what we need.
But the reality is, particularly if you are in that sort of like gray area of I do my job and, and I do more than my job, probably you're only demonstrating by being a little pushy, by being really confident, by being a good negotiator. You're probably demonstrating some of the things that your employer would want you to do on their behalf too. So you're proving you're good at it. And we have to get out of this mind frame, particularly now. We've seen that like FaceTime really is not all it's cracked up to be. And so, your job is not just the minutes you put in. For some people it is. If you work on the clock, like, yes, and I don't want to be of those people's job experiences, but for many of us, it is the collected years of experience and growth and education and contacts and relationships and confidence and comfort that you bring to your job, not just the hours that you put in, staring at somebody else's face saying I'm here. Right. So
and my butt is in my chair.
Yes, you have to be confident in it. It is actually more senior in many ways for you to work fewer minutes, fewer hours, and advocate for yourself in a way that demonstrates agency, because you're not, you're not a hamster on a wheel. Like, you're a person with a lot of amazing experience who brings great ideas and balance and demonstrates that to the people around them in a way that's inspiring, that also allows those people to see something ahead of them that they can aspire to be with a, reasonable sort of balance of life and paid work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an example. I did not see that as a young woman in the workplace. I didn't see, and I'd love for you actually to talk about balance a little bit. I've heard you say like we're not a fulcrum and it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
balanced, but I didn't see anything even remotely resembling balance. Like the women who were the most successful either did not have children or they had someone full time at home taking care of their children. It's just nothing that looked doable to me at that point in my life.
That's part of why when I do consult or when I teach best practices around retaining parents, I say you can't only have people who are in leadership already be making these decisions. You have to have people at all levels in the room, because there is a survivorship thing that happens. If you are a woman and you have made it to management level in an industry where that is not common, you had something working in your favor. It is possible that you had a partner who was home with your kids.
Yeah.
It is possible that you are actually just crazy, brilliant, insane, smart. It's possible that your body only needs 4 hours of sleep. I worked, like a lot of the people I worked with, like they had that. Does that mean that anybody who's beneath them, who doesn't have those things, doesn't have potential to be an amazing leader? No. When you're discussing the needs of a staff around you, you actually have to have the people who are in the thick of it. This is the same model as having younger parents in Congress and in our Senate. Like that, you want those voices represented. So it's really important to remember that there's a little bit of a survivor, bias that happens among the people who made it to the top because they had something working in their favor. Also, they have this like triple burden of being underrepresented, as in the case that I'm describing, as like, say, a woman with kids in leadership, and of doing what's probably a really, really hard job. Then of being an advocate for everybody around them who they want to bring up with them. And that takes up time.
Yeah.
There's something else I teach is that you really want to account for all of these ERGs, employee resource groups, and all of the the Zoom cocktail, like get to know you parent things that we've been doing. I mean, I lead a lot of them, right? Like I tell employers, you have to let people know that the time that they put into doing those things really, really counts toward their success, even if it's not a billable hour, even if it's not something they would normally see reflected in their annual review. Like they should feel like the list they come to you of the things they've achieved this year included all the sort of soft skill stuff they did to keep people from leaving, because that does ultimately make a better business. So we got to be rewarded for it.
Okay, so those people, whether they be in their fifth trimester or their 50th, going back to work, that's a huge adjustment for the mom, obviously, and also for the kids and their spouse or partner. What is your advice? What have you seen in your research to help minimize that shock to the family system or any surprise aftershocks that you might be setting yourself up for in the years ahead?
Sure. So it's interesting, so much of what I have researched and learned and just steeped myself in about the return to work after baby and about new moms' needs now applies so much more universally. And only in the last couple of months have I started to realize that it really applies to our kids too. So, if you were heading back to paid work after having a baby and you would want to try like a gradual reentry of like, maybe working like a 4-day week or working a 6-hour day at first to sort of baby step back in, that actually like we should be doing that same thing now. And we should be doing it for our kids too, which is, this is not necessarily a time, I think, for a giant Band-Aid ripoff, right? Like our kids need to also get used to things, and it helps to do transitions in baby steps. It really does. The other thing that I've learned that I'm saying a lot more than I used to is not just that we need to be transparent about our parenthood with our colleagues, but also like the other side of the coin, the inverse of that is that it's okay that our kids have seen us work really hard and be really stressed out about it and have some successes and have some failures. And the best way for our kids, I think, to be okay with that is for us to really contextualize it for them. And this is like even little kids as young as 3 can understand, why mommy is working so hard right now, like why daddy had to close the door for a couple of hours to, get through a big project. Like actually tell them what's happening, tell them about your colleagues, make these characters in your life and this work that you're doing real to them in a way that really models it. And then you can feel like you're actually parenting while you're working too.
I love that tip. I remember
I
we
do too.
had Kristen Van Ogtrop who
Oh,
just
I
wrote.
love this.
Did I say that out loud?
Kristen
Yeah,
hired
we.
me a billion years ago at Glamour.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh, yeah.
small
She's great.
world. Okay, well then I'll do a little shoot out for her book too.
Oh,
Boop, boop,
I
boop.
love her book. I love her book.
It's so great. Yeah.
Except for the
But
dog
when
chapter. I could not, I sobbed through the dog chapter. I could not like
Oh,
any
oh, I know.
more. I'm sorry,
I could,
Kristen, if you're listening.
I know. We told her, we're like, you took us through every emotion
for
on
real.
that.
Yes.
But it
Oh,
was funny because she was saying that, someone had told her, maybe it was you once upon a time, who said that she should be transparent about her work with her kids to let them know kind of what mommy does at work, which
Mhm.
resulted, you have to go back to listen to the episode to hear the whole
I
story. But
will.
it basically resulted in one of her kids taking her to school one day when asking what his mom does, says she fires people.
She
She
fires
fires.
people.
Oh God, that's so funny. No, Kristen was actually, so I have to say, she was an early role model for me because I worked for a lot of people whose jobs I aspired to have one day, but who I saw doing it in a way that I could never actually do, particularly with a partner, my husband being a doctor. He was in medical school through these years in publishing. He was a resident. He was doing overnight shifts for a week at a time. Kristen actually, I think maybe in part because she commuted, also just because she's just such a reasonable person, she would leave work. There were people there till I was like not infrequently at the office until 2 a.m., which I'm now embarrassed to even say because it's like
Oh my God.
ridiculous and not a way to live. But she
No.
would leave every day, like 5:15 on the dot to go get her train. And we all saw her leave, and she would come back in the morning with the work that she'd done on the train and hand it back. But, she was able to look at this is a very specific kind of work, but she was able to look at a manuscript. And rather than spending hours and hours and hours like rewriting and line editing, she could make 5 tiny, perfect changes that would make it true to the person's voice and not require an intense amount of labor. It's kind of what I was talking about before. She had just this level of expertise and
Mhm.
excellence that was confident enough to let other people's work shine through. And yet, like, you just got that sheen of Kristen on it that made it great. And
What a
I
gift.
really learned, that was before I had children, to see her do this. And I still think about it now, my kids
Yeah.
are, my oldest one's 12. Anyway, she's awesome. I can't wait to listen to your episode with her. That sounds
Oh,
great.
yes. Yeah, this shoe is so funny.
Yeah.
The
Well, we
other
want to
thing,
keep you to
yeah,
your time. We're
totally.
closing in on it. It's already,
Appreciate
yeah, we're so close. But before we go to Look, Listen, Learn, I want you to share with everybody how they can find information on your webinars so that
that. Thank
if
you.
their places of work could hire you, they know where
Great.
to get you.
Thank you. So I am mostly on Instagram. My handle is the Fifth Trimester, all spelled out. And if you DM me there, I'm happy to offer advice. I feel like it's in many ways my pro bono work because I'm just there. And I'm like, if I'm able to, I will answer your questions or I will, put you in touch with an expert who knows more about the specific need that you have. And also, it's often how I connect with people who work at companies that might like to bring me in as a speaker. So there's that. And then I also have my website is just thefifttrimester.com. I'm on Twitter at Lauren S. Brody. But dependably, Instagram is where you can find me.
Love the Instagram.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I think we can officially jump into the Look, Listen,
Sure.
Learn segment. This just gives our listeners an opportunity to learn a little bit about you beyond your professional expertise. So, is there anything that you have been looking, listening, or learning this week?
So many things. It's funny. I didn't read at the beginning of the pandemic, and like I'm a writer. Like you're definitely supposed to read if you're a writer. I could not read a book, and now I have just like binged. So I just finished Crying in H Mart, which is this gorgeous memoir by a woman who's the singer of a band called Japanese Breakfast, which I didn't know of because I'm not cool like that. She's a gorgeous, exquisite writer named Michelle Zauner, and it is such a beautiful story of the loss of her mom, which is not, it's not breaking news in memoir land to write about loss, but she does it in a way that is, what was cool for me is as the mom of like almost teenagers, I'm out of the baby phase, and she was writing very much about her like teenage years and early 20s, and it gave me this glimpse into kind of the way my children might see me and learn from me and feel like I am part of them as they grow, and the things that they're going to push back against. And it was really, really beautifully done. It's all told through, her mom was Korean, her dad is white, and she has a real bond over food with her mom. It's kind of the way they can connect. And it also just makes you very hungry reading the book.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh, definitely gonna check that out.
Loved that. And then I have to put in a plug for a podcast that has been around for 5 years, but that I only just discovered, which is called Tilt Parenting. And it is for neurodiversity of children. And my kids are, they're in mainstream school, but they both have dyslexia and ADHD. And I have loved the interviews that the host does. One of which was with Jessica Leahy, who is the author of a new book called The Addiction Inoculation. Are you guys having her?
Oh, it's on my nightstand.
It's in my Kindle right now.
Here, no joke. I'm sitting next to my nightstand.
Oh, good. You've got yours. And we've got the gift of failure around here too somewhere.
It is what I aspire to do with my nonfiction writing. And it's helping me a lot as I am in like the very early stages of writing my next book. She just does a really beautiful job of tying research and memoir about how to keep our kids from, or how to kids who are at risk, which is all of us, but kids who are more at risk than most of becoming addicted. What can you do as parents to help inoculate them and protect them? And it comes from her own experience, as she is, I believe, 8 years sober. She also teaches at a rehab center, teaches writing at a rehab center for kids who are in high school. So she just weaves these wonderful stories of her own and their stories with like a really wonderful reporter's eye view of the research. And I'm so impressed. It's great.
Yeah, we love Jess. And just a double plug for Jess. She also has the book, The Gift of Failure, but we're also huge fans of the hashtag Am Writing podcast that she does with our friend KJ. So yes. Big fan. And Serena too. Serena's been there more and more these days. So we'll plug Serena as well.
I love how they do that dance, the three of them, of like, you know, you have more time. We all can, you know, it's great.
Yeah, they were big inspiration. In fact, we talk about the Mom 2.0 conference a lot, but KJ has been she's been helpful on a lot of fronts for me, but also giving the inspiration and leading some of the sessions about how to do a podcast, and that, you know, you can do it and write and be a mom and still do all these things.
And raise 12 goats and a horse and like whatever wild animals you got.
She's got so many animals. I love her dogs.
I know. I know. Okay. So, well, Missy, what have you been listening, learning?
Well, it's interesting that you say that you weren't reading at the beginning of the pandemic. I really wasn't either. I was not reading and I was not writing. I watched more TV at the beginning than I think I have ever watched in my life. And then slowly I have been moving away from it. But the last couple weeks, this is not really my look, listen, learn, but the last couple weeks we've had some look, listen, learns recommended that were TV shows, and I had to go catch up on all of them. So thank you very much for taking me back to my binge watching, but I caught up on Mayor of Easttown. Yes. I was caught up, but then I guess there's a new episode last night, and Hacks, which I think you recommended Hacks to me, Suzanne.
I did. I love that one.
I watched both of those. Like I had time to watch entire. Hacks is only 2 episodes so far, so that wasn't a big deal. But Mayor of Easttown, I started last week, so it was 5 or 6 episodes in, and I caught up. So it's kind of embarrassing, but those were great.
Well, we've been using Mayor of Easttown as like a pick-me-up between our binging of The Handmaid's Tale.
It's not a good pick-me-up.
I don't want to do a spoiler, but there was one part of Mayor of Easttown last night. I was like, if XYZ happens, we're just going straight Handmaids from now on, because this show's getting even worse than Handmaids. But anyway.
Oh, it's pretty dark.
It's dark. It's dark.
Yeah,
I don't mean worse as in bad. I mean worse as just, oh my God, there's not enough bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt kind of blue after. I mean, of course, I binged it, which I don't ever think is super healthy, but I felt kind of blue after watching Mayor of Easttown, and I had not really expected that. But still so good. This is still a plug to watch it. It's really good. My learn this week is I got kind of the craziest gift for Mother's Day. I mentioned it. I showed it to my husband, but almost as a joke, because it's not cheap. but it's called the Garden with a Y, Gardyn. And it's a hydroponic growing system for inside your house. It's large,
It's
quite a
large.
bit
Oh
bigger than
God,
I
you've got it. We've
realized.
got, okay, we're going to share
I'll put
pictures of
pictures in
it.
the show notes. Yeah.
I just really
It's
don't want you putting a
large.
GY in with it. Like that this
Yeah.
is something to do with like, grooming
No.
post-pandemic.
Thank goodness. Thank
I
goodness.
I replied to Missy yesterday. I said, "Is the Y for why did I buy this garden system?"
Yeah. I was like, I think
It's
it might
so
be.
big.
It has these like it's a tower, and there's grow lights inside the tower. It is like having the sun in my kitchen. It's so bright, and it
It
comes
looks like a
on.
UFO landed.
It looks like a UFO landed in my kitchen.
So what do you get, like fresh herbs out of it?
Yeah, it's herbs,
Great.
flowers, lettuces. It can grow everything. And it really does seem exciting, but it's quite large and quite bright. And I don't know. And it's not cheap. So I think my husband and I both are like, we got to make this work. So now
Oh
I
my
need to
God.
figure out where to put it because I mean, it comes on automatically and it came on at 6 and I was awake, but I was still in my room. And I was like, what is happening? And I
Is it
realized,
like
oh, it's the
Christmas
garden.
vacation when the Christmas lights finally turn on?
Yes. Yes. So I am wondering if all the other plants in my house are going to get some of this grow light and be really happy, maybe.
Oh my
But we have
God.
to find it a new home because
My favorite
it's so
part is
where
the
it is.
website is like, it grows like 50 plants in 2 square feet. I'm like, well, 2 square feet on the floor, but it's like it goes whoop. They're not measuring
Yeah.
pure area, but
Yeah, it's pretty
but
cool.
it
But
is
I'm
so
trying
cool
to,
though. I'm giving you a
I
hard
don't
time,
know.
but it is
Well,
it's out of envy because I kill
no,
everything.
don't be envious. It gets a little bit crazy. I don't know. I don't know if this is a plug for garden or a stay away. We'll just have to keep you posted.
Yes. Oh my God, we could have a whole episode just about your garden. Oh my gosh. Okay. And so
What about you?
we've only got you for 9 more minutes here, so I'm gonna
Oh
be
no.
fast. No. So my learn is I'm learning more about this Wolfer group. So it's WOOLFER. So Lisa Levine, who we had last week with Midlife No Crisis, had shared a couple of groups kind of for midlife. And I thought she meant like a Facebook group. And she's like, "Oh, you guys should do a group like this." And I was like, "Oh, we have a group like that." But then I was like, "Oh no, this is a
This
real
is different.
group. It's
Yeah.
like a whole community. It's like a Facebook, but just for the people. And you have to pay. You have to pay. I'm on my 3-day free trial to see what it's all about. But I think I'm going to stick around. It seems really cool. It's like kind of like I said. It's almost like this really super safe Facebook for just people that are kind of in this same mind space where you are in this kind of midlife and really inspiring. Actually, it was funny that I was looking through the list of the interviews they've done, and of course there was Kristen Van Ogtrop and there was Jess
Okay.
Leahy. I was like, I know these people. So yeah, there's, and of course one of the most recent ones was with Lisa Levine, the interviews they do, but just like people who are in the same mind space, and it's like $35 a year. So I think it'll be a fun little trial. I'm going to check it out. And then also another learn, because I was at that iRelaunch conference I was in my closet at it
Yeah.
last week at the iRelaunch conference. And really something I kept hearing over and over, and it's been a question from people within our group, is like, how important is LinkedIn? And the answer seems to be super duper important. And not just when you're trying to look for a job, really to start building that community, because you never know when you might need to start looking for a job. And it's a lot easier if those people are already there. You've already got some engagement. So I think we're going to bring on a LinkedIn expert to actually talk about, okay, if you're a stay-at-home mom of 5 years and you have no plans to get a job, what does your LinkedIn look like versus if you are actually actively trying to seek a job type of thing. But so
I need
yes,
some major LinkedIn education.
They
Like
just
I
added all of these categories,
Yeah.
specifically sort of with the pandemic as a catalyst of, to help people bridge times when they were doing unpaid work, taking care of their kids during the pandemic. And also, I think just to normalize the fact that so many of us do this in an integrative way, and to show that unpaid labor counts as work.
Yeah. And it was interesting because a lot of the questions that came out of that conference were also, okay, I usually have tried to hide the fact I'm a stay-at-home mom. And now you're telling me I should check the box for stay-at-home mom on LinkedIn. Like, is that going to
Mm-hmm.
weed me out? And a lot of the employers that were there said, no, actually click it because
Right.
no one's going to use it as something to weed you out, but some may specifically search on it because they do have relaunch programs or these,
Yeah.
what are they called? The
Return
I have
shift.
to edit my thank
Return
you.
ship.
The return ships. And so they specifically search for that. Whereas people aren't going to be like, ugh, yuck. I mean,
Right.
it is so normalized now. I mean, as awful as COVID has been, you mentioned it, and it's something that I've been thinking of for the past year is people kind of finally get the mind of stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home parents now.
Yeah.
It is just a weird mind space, and you really can't get it until you have lost all control of everything in your life. And now the whole world has had this collective maternity leave of a
Taste
sort.
of it. Mhm.
And I just love that because I do think it just gives them that little. My husband, after my 4-month maternity leave, he actually did 3 months paternal leave because we didn't have the place that we
that
had
is
signed up for childcare when I was 3 months pregnant still did not have a spot.
wow.
Oh my gosh.
And so he did those months off. And I mean, he's still traumatized. He had to
there's research that shows that dads, and it's all heteronormative, but because that's who they studied, but that dads who took paternity leave have stronger bonds with their teenage children that many years later.
Yeah. And I
So-
see it. I see it with them, and they go to the comic book store and they go for walks together and whatever.
Yep.
And but I do think that put him in a place, especially for understanding me, even to these days. Like he just has a super appreciation for the stay-at-homeness. I mean, we lived in Seattle at the time, and he had that baby out at the zoo. It didn't matter if it was pouring. He's like, I just got to get out of this house at least once a day. I do not care. I'm gonna go crazy. And yeah, 3 months changed our entire outlook on parenting in our marriage. So I highly recommend it if people have that opportunity for everybody to take a turn. But yes, so I'm appreciating that the entire globe understands where our brains are and why after 15 years of this, we're kind of lacking some confidence.
Let's hang on to that progress. I'm pushing really hard in every conversation I have to make sure that we don't just, go back to our old normal in any way.
Exactly. Well, and you are doing such an amazing job of making sure these companies don't forget it and making sure that on a national standpoint, we don't forget it. And I forgot to ask earlier, we've got the Fifth Trimester here that I'm showing for all our YouTube viewers, all of you.
Both of you.
Is there another book in the works, or is it primarily
There
articles?
is. I will share really candidly because you all talk about work and about how, challenging it is. So I had started a book that was specifically for pandemic recovery for parents, both, to help our kids sort of bridge academic and emotional gaps, as well as our own career gaps. And the timing on it didn't work. Like it was, the research was done and there was just no way with a traditionally published book, which is what I wanted to do it in time. So instead I've shifted, I'm using a lot of that research, and I can't share the title, but it's essentially a book about, visibility, radical visibility of our children in our work and our work for our children, and just how completely integrative those two ideas are. And this needs to be how we really reframe our new working parent normal for progress coming out of the pandemic.
Wonderful. And
So
I
excited.
hear the dinging.
Yes,
I know
it is time.
I have a new laptop and I cannot figure out how to turn off notifications, which I thought I had turned off. I'm so sorry, you guys.
No, that's fine. Okay. It's a good reminder for us because everybody knows that we cannot keep ourselves under an hour. So you're keeping us honest. You're keeping us on time. I appreciate that. No, but so we want to make sure we honor your time. You've been so generous with it today. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All your great information. And thank you for all you've done for moms and changing the perspective of maternity leave.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was awesome. Wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for being here. Good luck with the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us for the Mom and ... podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you know someone else who could benefit from the episode, please be sure and share it with them. And while we're begging, please subscribe and rate us wherever it is you listen to podcasts. You can find links to all the things we discussed today in our show notes or over at our website, momandpodcast.com, with the A-N-D spelled out. In between shows, find us over at the socials, including our private Mom and Community Facebook group. The links to that group and all of our socials can be found at momandpodcast.com. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you more than you know. Now go out there and make your ellipses count.